G'day everybody, how you going today? It is so good to see you. I do hope you are super well. Today we're going to talk about a rumor that has just recently surfaced regarding Nikon and Red. Yes, they're talking about the arrival of the first Nikon camera with Red technology in it, coming sometime later this year. Let's get into that rumor. All right, well, if you jump to Nikon Rumours, you can see that they're talking about a camera that's going to use potentially the Z6 sensor. The body is going to look something like the Red cameras that we have today, a Sony FX3 and a Nikon Z30. Somewhere in there is where the rumor says the styling will be. And what technology can we expect in this camera? Well, this rumor is saying to us that we could be expecting quite a lot of technology from Red. I suppose the main things that Red do is, one, they create global sensors with high dynamic range. Two, they have a compression system which comes in all sorts of flavors, delivering beautiful 16-bit video. And then, of course, there is Red's color science. And basically, this is all we know at this point in time. So to summarize, a Z6 sensor, well, that means full frame. I'm very excited to hear that. Secondly, it's going to have a body that is very much video first. And thirdly, probably the major things that any cinematographer wants from the Red system is Red's compression and Red's colors. And if you look through the comments on Nikon Rumours, you can see people starting to speculate about the price. And what sort of price could a camera like this be? Well, from my perspective, it needs to be cheaper than the Komodo X that exists today, which comes in at $6,999 USD. That's the Komodo X with the Z mount and with the RF mount. There is a cheaper version of the Komodo with RF only. It is still a global sensor, does not quite have the same speed and dynamic range, although there's not that much in it, and that is available for $2,999 US, an absolute steal. And thus, where does this mean that this camera will fit in the market? Well, it's hard to say. I suppose if we look at the FX3 pricing, the Z30 pricing, and the current Red pricing, I think somewhere roughly between 600 USD for the Z30, and as we said before, 6,999 USD for the Komodo. What's halfway between them exactly? Well, I suppose it's around 3 to 3,500 USD. Would we be excited about a Red camera with a full frame sensor at that price point? And let's circle back to that Z6 sensor. That partially stacked sensor, we're using it right now. We're shooting 5.4K on the Z6 It's partially stacked, and what that means is it's super fast. Not as fast as a Z8 and a Z9, but I've used Z8, Z9 and Z6 extensively, and I can tell you, I can't really see a particularly big difference between them when it comes to rolling shutter. This sensor is pretty fast, and for a lot of use cases, might make perfect sense. And of course, Nikon would want that differentiator between that Super 35 slash almost APS-C Komodo X sensor, which is global. And global is awesome for certain use cases. And to me, global is kind of more important for filmmaking than it is for stills photography. The amount of stills photography use cases that benefit from global are very, very limited, and they're very, very niche. Whereas the amount of use cases in video that benefit from global are much higher. And thus, to have that differentiator between the Komodo X and the Z6 and of course price point, makes perfect sense. At the end of the day, if we've got a camera that's roughly somewhere between a Z30 and a Komodo X, and that's its price, and it's basically a Red, and it's shooting full frame, and it can mount Z Cineglass. Yes, Z Cineglass is something that we first heard about with the arrival of the 28 to 135 PZ zoom lens. Again, it makes perfect sense to me that if you are going to start to make a range of Z Cine lenses or Z Cinema lenses, then you may as well make some cameras to go with it. And sure, people can buy red cameras, and they're for people who are shooting Hollywood movies or Netflix or something on Disney or Amazon Prime, wherever you might be delivering your content. But of course, there's everybody below that who might be really, really happy to have an FX3 sort of level camera that is still a full-blown, fully certified red camera that can be used in these high-end productions, yet can be used in low-end productions as well. There is one other spec that is on this Rumor, which is the camera does not have an EVF. It has what's being called a large screen. And from the way I read this, it's a larger than normal screen. This is something that's pretty common in this space, and of course EVFs can be attached, whether it's via HDMI, which I'm sure a camera like this will have, as does the Z6 III, or even via USB-C. And thus, if it doesn't have an EVF, you can certainly attach one, and creating accessories, well, that would be awesome. And of course, Nikon would be fantastic at creating that sort of accessory because they make these sort of things for microscopes, let alone for every Nikon mirrorless camera. That is, of course, an EVF in a camera, whereas all they would need to do is create an EVF in a little housing. And guess what? That is like binoculars and monoculars, which of course Nikon make all of these sorts of things. So they would be perfectly capable of delivering a camera that doesn't have an EVF or can have some form of external or remote EVF. Very exciting stuff from my perspective. Now, one question in this space is, do we get in-body image stabilization? There is no comment on that in this Rumor. I would love it if it did. And based on the spec that we're seeing here, you know, this essentially could be a very similar camera to the Z6 III. It could have the same logic board, perhaps a little bit more space and a little bit more heat dissipation, so it can run a little higher frame rates and so on. But of course, it could have a similar or the same motherboard, which, as we know, features a full-sized HDMI port, along with some of the best audio inputs that we've seen on a Nikon camera. It would be great to be seeing all of these features advanced. So here we have it. It's a rumor. They're talking about sometime this year. Of course, we've still got, what, 6 or 7 months of this year left. It makes perfect sense to me. We were publicly told about the acquisition of Red now over a year ago. I suspect things were happening behind the scenes something like a year before that, which would mean they've had 2+ years to put this camera together. And if it is by the end of this year, it might be even close to 3 years. From my perspective, that timeline makes sense. It's feasible, it's possible, and of course, it's what we all expected from this acquisition of Red by Nikon, is that there would be a Nikon branded Red camera coming out at some point in time. And, well, the faster the better from everybody's perspective. And of course, we were already super surprised by the arrival of the Komodo X and the Raptor, with the Z mount being native, along with updated firmware. And I'm sure this is just the beginning. But of course, with Z Cinema being a branded lens range, we can't wait to see more lenses. And of course, well, a Nikon camera to go with it. I'm super excited about this. And if we do look at Nikon's short-term and medium-term plans, they definitely talk about between now and 2030 that high-end cinema cameras, they expected to absolutely be a growth area for them. And this would be all part of that aggressive growth into that system. If you create a camera, the FX3, for example, was used to create the film The Creator, of which I believe it was all shot on FX3s. If you can create a Hollywood level film on a camera like that, I would absolutely think that Nikon want to be in exactly the same space. I really can't wait to see if this rumor bears fruit. Very, very exciting. The rumor says it might be called a ZR along with the Z Cinema lenses. Well, what an exciting outlook we have. And at the end of the day, what's great for Nikon's general bottom line is good for all of us, because we want the research and development funds that come from opening up new markets to impact all parts of Nikon, which will also include stills photography and lens development, along with all sorts of other things. Sensor development, of course. All right, everybody, I'd love to know your thoughts about the ZR. Do you think it rings true? It's been so good to see you, and if this is your first time here, I'd love to see you again. So please do subscribe, please share, and please like. All right, bye for now.